everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by the one, the only, Wes Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field to preview this Sunday's matchup, Wes. It will be the Packers against the Steelers. On the road in Pittsburgh, it's a noon Central Time kickoff. And when you look at the 2023 Pittsburgh Steelers, if you're trying to find a lot of statistics that explain the Steelers' 5-3 record, you're going to have a hard time because, honestly, a lot of their numbers don't look good. It's hard to figure out in a lot of respects just on paper, like how this team is 5-3. But the two things that stand out are the turnover margin and how they played in the fourth quarters of most of their football games. It's a team that wins the turnover battle, and they play crunch time football, and that's why they're 2 games over 500.
It's a very unique team because, statistically diving into some of the defensive numbers, the fact that they're 31st in total defense. I mean, they're middle of the pack in scoring defense. They're fine there. But then, bottom of the third, bottom quarter of the league in running defense. But they're third in takeaways. It reminds me a lot of the 2011 Packers, when the Packers were dead last in total yards but led the league in takeaways. The only difference, though, is the Green Bay had a prodigious year offensively. Pittsburgh is having this success without scoring more than, I think, 26 points in any game this season so far. So, yeah, when you point out the turnover margin and the way they finish games with Kenny Pickett, that has certainly been the difference. And I've always said, and I wrote in our Insider Inbox column this week, you are what your record says you are. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have found ways to win 5 of their 8 games. The Packers have only won 3 of their 8 so far. You tip your cap to them, but at the same time, I think if I'm the Green Bay Packers going into this thing, you understand fully well what must be accomplished in order to win this football game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wrote a story on late in the day on Wednesday. It's up on Packers.com if you want to check it out, that lays out some of these numbers with regard to Pittsburgh. And you look at it, and some of it is just head scratching. I mean, they've been outgained on the season by roughly 800 yards. They're minus roughly 45 minutes on the season in time of possession. That's 3 quarters. It's 3 quarters of football that the opponent has had the ball longer than they have. They've been outscored by 30 points overall in the season, mostly because 2 of their losses were by 20-plus points to the San Francisco 49ers in Week 1 and then to the Houston Texans when they went down to Houston and everybody was like, whoa, what happened there? Obviously, they have rebounded and bounced back from that. But you mentioned Kenny Pickett. You had pointed out this stat to me yesterday, actually, that Kenny Pickett, the second-year starter for the Steelers, his passer rating in the first 3 quarters of games is 75.3. His passer rating in the fourth quarter is 108.2. I mean, that is a dramatic difference in terms of how he performs late in games compared to the rest of the contest. And that turnover margin is +8 on the season. The defense has 16 total takeaways, and +8 is only 1 off of the league lead, which is at +9 right now. I believe it's the Bengals and the Chargers maybe that are +9 on the season, and the Steelers are right behind at +8.
So smart. Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
You're confirming.
I am confirming it.
I'm correct.
That's the guy with the master's degree, and this is the guy with the not a master's degree.
It's just memory numbers.
I don't remember stuff like that.
Numbers stick in my head.
I need to have the information in front of me. But yeah, they're the.
This is the number, and I mentioned this on our 3 Things video as well as in the story. The number that sticks out to me is when you look at the fact that 4 of Pittsburgh's 5 victories, they have been trailing heading into the fourth quarter. And yet they came back in the fourth quarter to beat the Browns and the Ravens, 2 teams, 2 division rivals, teams in their own division, which are huge wins for them. Also coming back in the fourth quarter to beat the Rams and the Titans. And not just the fact that they trailed going into the fourth quarter and won those games, but the collective fourth quarter score in those 4 games is 42-0.
Yeah.
The defense has given up nothing in those 4 games when they have come back to win in the it's not like they get into some sort of a fourth quarter shootout, I guess is my point, where suddenly the defenses get worn out and the offense is going, back and forth up and down the field. That happens in NFL games sometimes. That's not what this is. This is a team that in the fourth quarter has shut down opponents, and then their quarterback, as I just mentioned with that rating number, finds a way to elevate his game, and the offense finds a way to get the score or scores that they need to pull out victories, and all sorts of other statistics get thrown out because these guys are 5-3 and they're right in the thick of it in the AFC North.
Yeah, and Kenny Pickett is a guy that I feel like for whatever reason people have tried to kind of diminish him a little bit. And I think he's been underrated in some terms because if you're a second-year quarterback that has also played in that city, was a first-round pick and had the expectations that he's had, but have been able to pull off 6 fourth-quarter comebacks in this short a time, which I think we were saying is either first or second in the NFL right now since the beginning of last season.
Basically less than 2 seasons he's done that.
That's pretty darn impressive.
Yeah, it is.
And this offense does operate much differently when he's out there as opposed to, when Mitchell Trubisky had to sub in for him a little bit 2 weeks ago. But here's the thing that not enough people are talking about when we break down this matchup is what's going on offensively right now with the Steelers. Rushing offense has been sort of blasé so far this year. Najee Harris, they've been okay, but not great. Well, then you have Jalen Warren pop up.
Yeah.
Former undrafted free agent, 5'8", 215 pounds. This guy's a little battering ram in terms of what he can do to an opposing team. This isn't a 5'8", 170-pound kid. This kid packs a punch. And they've turned out to be a pretty good complement. They're coming off their best running performance of the season against Tennessee. Deontay Johnson is back now, off injured reserve. As much of a big play threat as George Pickens is, it's Deontay Johnson who's been sort of the Romeo Dobbs of this offense, for a lack of a better term, the guy that can consistently move the chains for you. Kenny Pickett has developed a rapport with him. He did it last year. He's doing it again this year since he's been back. There are guys offensively that can hurt you, but where Green Bay must succeed in this game is in protecting the football and taking the football away. Pittsburgh's defense has as many fumble recoveries as they do interceptions. It's 8-8 of those 16 so far this season.
Right. They get the ball out.
Yeah, and they get on the football.
Mm-hmm.
Green Bay has to be able to protect the football. If you go back to last week, it wasn't clean, it wasn't perfect, but when they did have the turnovers, they didn't allow any points off them defensively. And when they got them, they were able to generate them. A lot going on in this matchup, Michael, but certainly, if you take away the team stats and all that sort of things, this is still a very dangerous Pittsburgh Steelers team coached by one of the best in the game in Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mike Tomlin, as many people know, he's in his 17th season as a head coach. He has never posted a losing record over the course. He's had some, 8-8s in there before the switch to the 17-game season. Had some 8-8s in there, but in his first 16 years in the league, 10 playoff appearances. There's a lot to be said for that. The vast majority of that, well, pretty much all of that, actually, for Tomlin was with Ben Roethlisberger, the future Hall of Fame quarterback. Now they've made the transition over the last couple of years to Kenny Pickett. George Pickens is that big play guy for Pickett. He's averaging 17.5 yards a catch per season. 17.5 yards per catch this season, which is a pretty standout number. And
cost me to lose my fantasy game though last week by not getting his feet down. I would have won otherwise. Who's counting?
But you mentioned though, and what is kind of striking is that this Pittsburgh defense from a yardage standpoint is ranked as low as it is because, and I know Cam Hayward's been injured and he's back now, but I mean what T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith are doing off the edge, those two guys have combined for 14 of the Steelers' 26 sacks. They have been missing Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's been, one of their playmakers,
who's still out this week.
Probably their biggest playmaker in the secondary. But it's a defense that has built its success on pressuring the quarterback and generating turnovers, whether that be the strip sacks or whether that be wayward throws that get intercepted. They like to force quarterbacks into making mistakes. That's really what it comes down to. And absolutely protecting the football is paramount here. I should mention, when we're talking about George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Jair Alexander popped up on the injury report this week for the Packers with a different injury. It's not his back, but he is now dealing with a shoulder injury. He missed practice on Wednesday. At the time we are taping this is prior to Thursday's practice, so we don't know much about Alexander's status, but the fact that Rasul Douglas was traded last week, and if Alexander is unable to go in this game, that really changes the look of things for the Packers defense. So that's definitely something to watch moving forward.
It does, because now you're not just talking about like a Carrington Valentine having to play. You're talking about, Corey Ballantyne, who's off the practice squad.
Right.
Ennis Gaines played last week as an elevation. Maybe he potentially is added. That's where you're starting to dig a little bit into this depth, depending on where things sort out. And certainly when you look at Pickens and the dangerous threat he provides over the top, you'd love to have a guy like Alexander, especially, depending on what happens in the deep secondary there with Rudy Ford, who was back at practice on Wednesday.
Right.
Defensively, though, Pittsburgh has had to kind of weather some stuff here. When you look at, Cole Holcomb ends up having his injury. He's out now. He was one of their leading tacklers. Their two leading tacklers didn't play last week.
Yeah.
With him and Fitzpatrick. So, Keanu Neal has had a little bit of a resurgence there, stepping in for Minka. But overall, the yards have been there. It's just been the bend but don't break mentality that has allowed Pittsburgh to survive that much. Like, again, drawing that comparison to the Packers in 2011. But for the Packers, it comes down to having that plan up front. And that's kind of the thing I want to bring it back full circle with is with TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, you have two high-energy, similarly built guys that are going to give your edge rusher or your on the edges, you're going to give your tackle some issues, but also just the way that they can bowl themselves around inside too if they need to. That's going to be a big point of emphasis in this game for Green Bay, because if you allow them to start creating those pressures, that's where takeaways happen.
Yeah.
And the fact that, when I mentioned those 8 fumbles recoveries, 3 of those are TJ. And I don't even know how many of those he generated himself. So
right.
It does show you the dangers that lie ahead with this Pittsburgh team. But at the same time, you would hope from the Green Bay Packers perspective, especially with how progressively healthier they've been getting on the offensive side of the ball, this would be a matchup that lines up okay for Green Bay and in terms of the matchups they want to be able to develop.
Well, one injury certainly the Packers are watching on the offensive side of the ball is at left tackle, because Yosh Nijman had taken over for Rasheed Walker, but then after the first half against the Rams last week, he was having a little bit of trouble with his back, so he went to the bench. Walker came in and finished the game. Nijman did not return to practice on Wednesday. So again, that's another thing to watch, because it seemed Nijman had certainly moved ahead of Walker on the depth chart and seemed to be taking that left tackle spot back. But now with the injury, that's a little bit uncertain. And whichever guy, whether it's Watt or Highsmith that ends up on that side, I know sometimes they flip-flop those guys back and forth, at least occasionally. Yep. We'll have to see how exactly how the Packers are going to match up there. But I want to get to our keys to victory. I think we've already said protect the football 3 or 4 times throughout this. But aside from that obvious talking point of protecting the ball, what else do the Packers need to do to win this game?
Well, probably Sunday? Protect the football. No, just kidding. 2 stats that really stand out to me defensively for Pittsburgh. A lot of things on the high end of things, where you see the 29s, the 30s in terms of their rankings. Well, 2 areas that are really exceptional this year has been 4th downs and in the red zone. Both of those type of statistics, I think, speak to not only their ability to stop opposing teams, but also some turnovers they've generated in that side of the field. Again, I don't want to just keep belaboring the bend but don't break, but that's the way they've survived. So for Green Bay's standpoint, a team that has been pretty proficient inside the red, gold, whatever you want to call it, zone, this year, they need to be able to keep that going. I love the way, and we talked about this on Tuesday's show, I love the way they finished last week. They turned turnovers into points. They turned opportunities into points. And they got the 20 points they needed to win that game handily. Maybe you do need more in this game. Maybe you don't. But being able to actually convert when you get into Steelers territory is going to be huge. Because, Mike, it's just not about when you face the Steelers, the points and the score on the scoreboard. It's also about the momentum meter. And I think when you follow Pittsburgh and you follow some of these things they've done in the fourth quarter, a lot of it is when momentum has turned drastically in their favor.
Yeah.
And I think that's one area where Green Bay has to come up big in this one. When you get the chances, you have to be able to turn it into points.
Yeah, and this game to me, I don't see either one of these offenses right now going up against these respective defenses. I don't see either one of these teams being able to salt this game away in the first 3 quarters. This is going to be a crunch time game. It's going to come down to the fourth quarter, and you have to be the better team in those moments, and that is that much harder to do when you're on the road versus at home. And all you have to do is look at the Packers 2023 season, right? The fourth quarter against the Saints. The Packers have the big comeback. They have a really strong fourth quarter to beat the Rams. Those were at home. The fourth quarter in Atlanta, the fourth quarter in Vegas, the fourth quarter in Denver. The Packers had all the opportunities you could ask for, and they did not prove to be the better team in those instances. So this is going to be a game where the Packers are going to have to get it done in crunch time on the road, hostile crowd, the terrible towels waving, all of that kind of stuff. The other statistic I'll point out that I think is pretty interesting is that veteran kicker Chris Boswell for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been a big part of this because their offense does not light up the scoreboard. They do kick a fair amount of field goals. He's only missed 1 kick all season, and it was actually from 61 yards away is his only miss of the year. So that's something to watch as well. In Pittsburgh, outdoors, we'll see what the weather is like and everything. And if you're asking, am I trying to jinx him into missing some kicks on Sunday? Yes, I absolutely am. But veteran kicker, the Packers are going to have their rookie kicker Anders Carlson, who's had his ups and downs lately too. So everything, all 3 phases are gonna play a part in this. I thought, I'll just mention 2 briefly before we move on. Packers special teams, aside from Carlson missing the kick at the end of the first half, which was unfortunate, but in the return game, Packers might have started to find something against the Rams, and not just, the obvious, which was the 51-yard kickoff return by Keyshawn Nixon to open the second half. But Nixon also had a 15-yard punt return, and Jaden Reed had a 22-yard punt return. When you're getting those types of returns, it doesn't have to be the 40 and 50-yard explosive returns. Like a 15-yard punt return, a 22-yard punt return, those can be big in the field position game. And if the Packers are starting to find something with regard to their return game, I think that could play a huge factor on Sunday when every any yard here or there could be the difference between whether you're going to be in field goal range and be able to get points in a game where points may be at a premium, or are you going to be in a position where you have to go for it on 4th down, or you're going to try to punt them, back inside the 10-yard line. Everything is really going to, I think, be magnified in this game just because of the way these 2 teams have played so far this season.
Yeah, and I unfortunately didn't do my proper research on my Claire Treader stat packet that she brings down, our wonderful communications intern.
Yes.
Last week, I believe Green Bay was leading the league in, was it opposing starting field position or that discrepancy between the two? Packers have actually done a really good job there when it comes down to where they've been starting as opposed to where the opponent's starting. I will throw this stat at you, though, Michael.
Okay.
Because you're a big stat guy.
Yeah.
Green Bay Packers presently kickoff returns and punt returns. Do you know where they rank? You can pick either one first if you want.
I do not. That is not one that I.
Take a quick guess?
That is not one that I looked up.
I did look this one up because I was curious after Keyshawn's 51-yarder where the kickoff return was, so I looked at both of them.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the Packers have had a whole lot of opportunities this year.
No.
I mean, there have been a lot of touchbacks.
But it's the National Football League.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of teams that play in warm weather. There's been a lot of touchbacks. But if you had to just give me a guess, obviously it's good because I wouldn't be throwing it at you if it was like, oh, they're 31st. Kickoff returns, punt returns average. Where do you think they rank?
I'm going to guess punt returns they're around 10th in the league, and kickoff returns, I'll say 12th.
Packers are 3rd in kickoff return.
3rd?
Yep. Average so far this season.
Wow.
I think a part of that's probably been a product, too, of Keyshawn taking a couple out.
Yeah, from 8-9 yards deep. Yeah, because
28 yards is 28 yards.
You get all those yards, right.
But right. I think it shows you one explosive, getting back to your original premise of this question, one explosive, how important that can be. I'll tell you what, man, I thought in that game, there were so many things that happened especially the fumble after his kickoff return, that we weren't really able to put the proper light on Keyshawn's performance, but I thought he was a spark for them.
Yeah.
I thought he's shown the signs there of seeing the field well, getting the blocks he needs, and being able to break a few. 8th in punt return average, too, by the way.
Okay, well, I was a little closer on my guess.
You were closer there, but I like what I've seen from that group, and I think especially this is the time of the year, Michael. You're going to be in Pittsburgh. You're going to be back in Green Bay. You're going to be back in Green Bay 2 weeks after that. New York. It's going to get colder. There's going to be more opportunities, and I think this is Keyshawn Nixon season in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and you wonder if the fact that obviously the injuries don't entirely go away, but just some of the settling down in the injury department has maybe allowed those special teams units to get more consistent with their personnel. And when the personnel is more consistent, perhaps the performance then becomes more consistent and more reliable for what Rich Bisaccia and those guys are looking for.
100%. Even look at last week with the Flyers. I mean, Innis Gaines is on the practice squad. It was his 3rd game that he'd been elevated, but Innis has been around for a couple of years now. He was inserted right away on one of those as one of those Flyers at the first team, and he's getting down the field. These guys understand what the standard is. And while there have been a lot of injuries, you do have the guys you can hang your hat on, the Dallin Levitts, the Eric Wilsons, the Isaiah McDuffies, guys that have been there, done that, and then some. And I think overall, they had a big wake-up call 2 weeks ago with that almost a kickoff return against Minnesota. But I thought they really came together with a strong performance in that win last week.
Yeah, I thought so too. I'll take care of some sponsor business here, Wes. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50 years of better. All right, a glance around the league. Another week of some intriguing matchups in the NFL in Week 10. I'm going to rattle these off to you, the ones that jumped out to me when I glanced at the schedule, and I'll let you talk about whichever ones you want to.
Thank you.
Cleveland is at Baltimore. Interesting matchup in the AFC North with Baltimore has had its ups and downs. They've really manhandled some good teams, and then they'll have a letdown, you know. So this is a big division matchup in the AFC North with Cleveland traveling to Baltimore. Houston is at Cincinnati with C.J. Stroud coming off of that, monstrous rookie performance, and now going into Cincinnati where the Bengals seem to be finding themselves with Joe Burrow being fully healthy now. Although now Jamar Chase is hurt. He's hurt his back in that Sunday night game against Buffalo, so that could be an impact there. San Francisco at Jacksonville.
Ding.
2 playoff teams from a year ago, one of those interesting AFC-NFC matchups. And then as far as the NFC North goes, New Orleans is at Minnesota. You had brought this one up on our last show. Minnesota turning things over, obviously, to Josh Dobbs at quarterback. And the Saints, despite what they obviously believe was a game at Lambeau Field back in Week 3, they should have been able to win, up 17-0 going into the fourth quarter. But the Saints have rebounded from that and put themselves in good position. And then the Detroit Lions are back from their bye week, and they will travel out west to face the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers and the Lions being the 2 Packers opponents in the next 2 games after the trip to Pittsburgh, those 2 teams going head-to-head on Sunday.
Well, first off, my older brother, Pete Carmichael, I like some of the adjustments they've made in New Orleans. One of those.
Older brother.
You ever look at Pete Carmichael?
Yes, I have.
That's my older brother. I mean, I know some people, they'll be like, oh, there's a guy with glasses and dark hair that looks like you. No, Google Pete Carmichael. We're the same person. 15 years difference in age, but otherwise the same person. But the Saints got back to doing the things that made them good a few years ago.
Yeah.
Taysom Hill's doing some really creative stuff. They're using him to the best of his capabilities again. Alvin Kamara's just been a major difference for this offense.
Yeah.
They are different when he's available.
Yeah, not having him earlier in the season definitely impacted where the Saints were going, and they seem to be hitting their stride now offensively.
But let's focus on what matters most for the Packers, because I just want your opinion on this, because I don't know if I have one. Maybe you don't either, but we'll try. Detroit and the LA Chargers.
Yeah.
This is interesting because historically, you just want the Chargers to win this. I think you still do want the Chargers to win this, but then you got them on the other side of this thing.
Yeah.
And you also have Detroit, probably 2 weeks from today, I think. Thanksgiving?
Yes, 2 weeks from today would be Thanksgiving Day. That's correct.
Actually, right about right now, you and I will be getting ready to eat turkey together. So, happy Thanksgiving. What do you make of this matchup? I watched most of that Chargers game on Monday. I mean, they handled the Jets.
Yeah. Very
curious to see how they respond now against.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know what to make of that Monday night game. I realized the Chargers were on the road. You're going all the way across the country to play a primetime game on the road, so nothing's easy about that. But man, the Jets offensively were just so bad. Like I don't really know what to make of that. I do think, based on what I've seen, I think Justin Herbert is playing a lot better now than he was earlier in the season.
Austin Eckler's healthy too.
Yeah, and with Eckler being healthy, but it seemed like Herbert was a little more erratic, I think, earlier in the season, and he's kind of getting his, getting his legs and the fundamentals and everything underneath him. As far as who do you want to win? I mean, it's always just natural to cheer for anybody that's playing, an NFC North opponent. And hey, like if I guess I look at it this way: if the Chargers knock off the Lions, and that'll be them stringing together a few victories, I think everybody's going to suddenly start talking about the Chargers, and I think that works to the Packers' advantage with the Chargers coming in here the following week. But I do think that matchup is really intriguing. It's a big test for Detroit, going all the way out to the West Coast, playing a team that seems to be finding itself, and the Lions coming off of their bye week, and they're ready to make a charge and take this NFC North division and stay in control of it. Because here's the thing, Wes. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in Minnesota with Josh Dobbs making his first actual start as the Vikings quarterback. But if the Chargers knock off the Lions, and Minnesota with Dobbs can beat the Saints in Minneapolis, suddenly the NFC North feels a heck of a lot more wide open as opposed to the Lions, kind of being the front runner and sitting in the catbird seat. They would still be in first place. Yeah. But that all changes if they were to lose and the Vikings were to win another one. So a lot of interesting things there. But yeah, seeing the two teams, it's funny how that worked out, because it wasn't that long ago that the Rams and the Steelers were playing each other, and then they were back-to-back opponents for the Packers right after that. Yep. And now the Chargers and the Lions are playing each other, and they're back-to-back opponents on the Packers schedule right after. It's there's just been schedule quirks like that all season.
You might have just figured out the whole process here.
Maybe something with one of those computer algorithms. Maybe that's how they spit some of this stuff out. I don't know.
But the Spofford code.
Isn't that weird though?
It is. It is very strange.
Yeah, it feels.
There's
like
a lot of interesting. We can do an entire episode on just all the weird quirks of this year's schedule. Like remember with Denver, where it was like, hey, they're going to play Kansas City, and then they're going to play Green Bay, and then they're going to play Kansas City. Then you're on a bye.
Yeah.
Like what? Like how does that work?
Yeah.
But
exactly.
but certainly when you get. There will be certain amount of patterns that develop like that when you're having these cross-conference, divisional matchups. But for Green Bay, I think you laid that out perfectly. If the Chargers can take care of business against Detroit, in addition to whatever happens with the Vikings, and let's say the Packers, not promising anything, Packers take care of business against the Steelers and then against the Chargers, well, then Thanksgiving becomes really interesting.
Yeah.
With Green Bay having that opportunity.
Yeah, no question about it.
When you're at 3 wins, you have to find a way to claw yourself back. And when you're looking up at a Lions team that has 2 losses, you have to find a way for them to have setbacks. And right now, Green Bay just has to worry about what's in front of them. But, I mean, it's still all right there for them on the other side of this thing if you get the job done against Pittsburgh on Sunday.
Yeah, well, it's time for the Packers to start stacking something, right? Packers have not had a winning streak. They have not won 2 games in a row this season. The last winning streak for this team was in December of last year, and you don't get anywhere in this league without stringing together victories, so it's got to start somewhere for Green Bay.
So it's been 53 years now since they've won at Acupuncture Stadium, right?
In the city of Pittsburgh.
In the city of Pittsburgh, that's what it was. Okay.
Yes, 1970. I'll be writing about that over the weekend, actually, looking at this this history of the Packers actually losing a lot of close games, unfortunately, in Pittsburgh, both at Three Rivers and at Heinz/Acrisure Stadium.
Aquafilter?
Acrisure.
Aqualung?
All you have to do is spell it right on Sunday.
That's it.
So I don't have to fix it.
That's
when
my
you
guy.
Send me your stories. All right. With that, we're gonna call.
What
it
if I
a
put
wrap.
Three Rivers? Will you let it stay if I put Three Rivers?
Wait, yeah, I'll just let that one stay in there.
Old Three Rivers Stadium.
There
All
we
right,
go.
we're done.
There we go.
Send
We're
us
gonna
home.
call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team, and we will have everything for you from Sunday's game in Pittsburgh at whatever stadium you want to call it. It will be there for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.